9 in the morning, the 7th of June, 1992. A girl in bare feet walks up to her best friend's front porch. There's broken glass on the concrete. The porch light smashed, the bulb still hanging there intact. She doesn't think much of it. She's barefoot, so she sweeps the glass off the porch and goes inside. In doing that one small, kind, ordinary thing, she may have just destroyed the only piece of forensic evidence anyone would ever find, because the 3 women who lived in that house, they're already gone, and 33 years later, nobody knows where. Right then, hello all you lovelies out there. This is Static After Dark. I am Lucy, and if you're hearing this, then you are an After Darker. And you are very, very welcome here. You are one of us. Before we get going, a quick word. The stories we tell on this show are real, and some of them get a bit dark in places. Tonight's one absolutely does. So if you're not in the right headspace for that this evening, please go and look after yourselves. We'll still be here when you're ready, and so will the case. For everyone else, settle in. Dim the lights, do whatever it is you do. Because tonight we're going to Springfield, Missouri, June 1992. A mother, her teenage daughter, and her daughter's best friend, all in the same house overnight. 3 women, 3 cars in the driveway, a dog, a porch light, and then, by morning, only the cars, only the dog, only the porch light. 3 women vanished without a single sign of how. How does that happen? In a quiet street, in a normal house on the night after a high school graduation. How does a crime scene disappear before anyone even knows there is one? Let me introduce you to them first, because I think that matters. Before we get into what happened, before we get into the porch light and the answering machine and the 30 years of dead ends, I want you to know who these 3 were on the day before all of this started. 3 women, very different points in their lives, who only had that one Saturday in common. Sherrill Levitt was 47 years old. She was tiny. 5 foot nothing, about 110 pounds, short blonde hair, brown eyes. She was a cosmetologist. She worked at a salon in Springfield, did people's hair for a living, knew the regulars, knew their kids' names. She was a single mum, and by every account, a brilliant one. She and her daughter Suzie were properly close. Not in that performative way some mothers are, but in the kind of way where they actually liked each other's company. They lived together in a small 1-story house at 1717 East Delmar Street. Sherrill had a Yorkshire Terrier called Cinnamon. Suzie, Suzanne Elizabeth Streeter, but everyone called her Suzie, was 19. 5'2", just over 100 pounds, shoulder-length blonde hair, brown eyes. She had a little scar on her right forearm and a mole at the corner of her mouth, and her left ear was pierced twice. She'd just finished her senior year at Kickapoo High School. She was a creature of habit, according to her friends, particular about little things. Where she parked her car, for instance. There was a carport at the side of the house, and Suzie always parked in the same spot in it. Friends noticed when she didn't. And then there was Stacy McCall. Stacy was 18, 5'3", 120 pounds, long dark blonde hair, light eyes. She and Suzie had been friends through school. They'd graduated together that same day, the 6th of June 1992, at Hammond Student Centre on the Missouri State Campus. There's a photograph of the 2 of them from that night that's been doing the rounds for 30 years now. They're in their gowns, smiling in front of the school, both of them looking, exactly like you'd expect 2 girls who'd just finished school to look, ready for the summer, ready for whatever was coming next. What was coming next for both of them was a trip to a water park, Whitewater, in Branson, about 45 minutes south. They'd planned it for the Sunday morning. Graduation Saturday, water park Sunday. Classic. Now, I want to walk you through the day, because this is one of those cases where every tiny ordinary choice ends up mattering. There was a graduation ceremony in the afternoon. Sherrill went and watched her daughter walk. The girls hit a couple of parties that evening with their friend Janelle Kirby. First one out in Battlefield, which is a little town just southwest of Springfield, then a few more in town. The plan for the night was that all 3 of them, Suzie, Stacy, Janelle, would crash at Janelle's place in Battlefield, drive to Whitewater in the morning. The last party of the night was at a friend's house, a girl called Michelle Elder. Stacy was there, and she and Michelle, they got talking. They were old friends who hadn't seen much of each other lately, and they made plans to meet up properly on the Sunday evening, after the water park. Sunday evening. Remember that. Stacy went into that Saturday with plans for the next day, and the day after that. The party at Michelle Elder's got broken up by the Springfield police at 1:50 in the morning. Apparently neighbours had had enough. The three girls drove back to Janelle's house in Battlefield, got there around 2. And then this is where things change. Because Janelle's place was packed, out-of-town family in town for her own graduation, every spare bed taken, Suzie and Stacy decided, fine, we'll just go to Suzie's instead. King-size waterbed at Sherrill's house, brand new, just delivered. Suzie was excited to show Stacy. They'd drive over, sleep there, drive back in the morning to meet Janelle for the trip. Janelle's mum, Kathy, was already in bed. She told the police later that she heard the girls leaving. She heard Suzie say to Stacy, "Follow me to my house," and she heard Stacy answer, "Okay, I will." That is the last time either of them is heard from. 2 in the morning, Battlefield, Missouri, 7th of June, 1992. Right, so here's what we know about the rest of that night, and here's where the case starts. Doing the thing it does, where the more you look, the less you actually have. Suzie and Stacy left Janelle's around 2 a.m. and drove to 1717 East Delmar. That's the only direction they were heading. Sherrill's house less than 15 minutes away. We know they got there. We know that because everything they brought with them, their clothes, their purses, their jewellery, their car keys, both their cars, every last thing was in that house the next morning, exactly where you'd expect it to be. Stacy's clothes from the party were folded neatly in Suzie's bedroom, the same clothes she'd worn out that night, the only clothes she'd brought with her. There were makeup wipes that had been used, like in the last few minutes before bed. Suzie's contact lenses were sitting on the side. There was an unfinished can of Coca-Cola next to Suzie's pack of cigarettes. The lights in Suzie's room were off, but her television was on, and it was just showing static. Snow, we used to call it. The end of tape signal. So they'd watched something, maybe a film, fallen asleep, or started to, and never got round to turning the TV off. Sherrill's bed in the master bedroom looked slept in. Not made, not torn apart. Slept in. A blind on one of the windows was bent at a slightly odd angle. The dog, Cinnamon, was in the house, agitated but unharmed. Sherrill herself, by the way, we know what she was doing that evening too. At around 11:15, before any of the girls got home, Sherrill was on the phone with a friend. They were talking about an armoire, specifically about painting and varnishing an armoire that Sherrill was redoing in her bedroom. That's her last known conversation. 11:15 at night, talking about decorating. Hung up the phone, presumably went to bed, presumably went to sleep with the dog, in the house she'd lived in for years. By 2 a.m, Suzie and Stacy are pulling into the carport. Or, well, are they? Because here's a small thing, a small, possibly nothing, possibly everything thing. I mentioned earlier that Suzie was a creature of habit about where she parked. Always in the carport, always the same spot. The morning after, both Suzie's car and her mother's car were outside the carport, not inside it. Now, it's 2 in the morning, she's exhausted, she's got her best friend with her, maybe she just parked badly for once. But her co-worker, Nigel Kenny, looked at it later and said, "Suzie wouldn't do that, someone else parked there first." Make of that what you will after darkers, it might be nothing, it might be the only thing that matters. So that's the picture by, let's say, 2:30 in the morning. 3 women in one house, mother in her own bed, daughter and best friend in the daughter's room, television on, television still going, dogs downstairs, outside in front of the porch, somewhere between 2 a.m. and 9 a.m. We know one thing happened, and we know it because of the glass. The porch light, the glass shade, the globe over the bulb, got smashed. Just the globe, not the bulb. The bulb was intact and still hanging there. Whoever broke the globe was deliberate enough to leave the bulb alone, or unlucky enough to break only the outer shell of it. Either way, someone at some point during the night hit that porch light with something hard enough to shatter the glass cover. Why? We have absolutely no idea. The most innocent reading is that one of the girls accidentally knocked it on the way in, but the carport is on the side of the house and they wouldn't have been coming in through the front. The less innocent reading is that someone deliberately took out the porch light from the outside to stop anyone seeing what was about to happen, to call somebody to the front door. We don't know. We don't know an awful lot of things, actually. We don't know what time the women were taken. We don't know if all three were taken at the same time. We don't know if they went voluntarily or under threat. We don't know if there were one or two or more attackers. We don't know if it happened in the house or whether they were lured outside. What we do know is, by 9 a.m, the 7th of June, 1992, all three of them were gone. And the first person to walk through that front door wasn't a police officer. It was an 18-year-old girl in bare feet with a broom. Janelle Kirby woke up on the morning of the 7th of June expecting to drive to a water park with her best friends. The plan was meet at Janelle's, leave from Janelle's, get to Whitewater by lunchtime. Easy day, easy summer. Suzie and Stacy didn't show. Janelle called the house, no answer. Called again, no answer. So she got her boyfriend, Mike Henson, in the car with her and drove over to Sherrill's house at 1717 East Delmar to see what was going on. They got there around 9 a.m, and the very first thing Janelle noticed, was that the porch light, the glass globe, was shattered, smashed all over the concrete, the bulb still hanging in mid-air. She thought that's odd, then she thought, I'm not wearing any shoes. Mike Henson, like the good lad he was, swept it up for her so she wouldn't cut her feet. Just brushed it all off the porch in a couple of swipes. He told the police later he did it because she was barefoot. There was no reason at that point for either of them to think anything was wrong. The front door wasn't broken, the windows weren't broken. Nothing was on fire. The cars were in the drive. Sherrill's car, Suzie's car, all of them sitting there like normal. Why would you think anything other than they're inside, they slept in, knock on the door? The front door was unlocked. They went in. Cinnamon the dog came running, agitated, whining. The kind of energy a dog gives off when it's been in the house alone for hours and something has gone wrong. Janelle and Mike walked through the house, called out, looked in the bedrooms. Sherrill's bedroom, empty, bed slept in, no Sherrill. Suzie's bedroom, empty, television still showing static, no Suzie, no Stacy. Bathroom, kitchen, living room, nothing. They figured, all right, the three of them have gone out somewhere, forgotten about the water park, whatever. They were teenagers. Sherrill was an adult. This wasn't their problem to solve. Janelle was, you have to remember, 18 years old, the morning after her friend's graduation parties, not in a position to mount an investigation. And then the phone rang. She picked it up. A man's voice on the other end. Sexual innuendo. Janelle, understandably horrified, hung up. The phone rang again. Same caller, same kind of thing. She hung up again. She told the police later the voice sounded young. Teenish was her word. Springfield Police's David Asher described the calls as obscene, repeated F words, the kind of call where you put the phone down and your skin's crawling for the rest of the day. Now, here's a wrinkle. Janelle wasn't completely caught off guard, because Suzie had told her a few weeks earlier that the house had been getting prank calls ever since Suzie had moved back in with her mum in the spring of '92. Random sexual phone calls, hang-ups. They'd been going on for a while, so Janelle, in the moment, registered the calls as creepy, but kind of normal creepy, not as evidence. She and Mike left. They decided they'd go to a different water park instead. There was one in Springfield itself, a place called Hydroslide, doesn't exist anymore. They drove off. They had a fine afternoon. They assumed they'd hear from the girls when they got home. Several hours go by. The afternoon stretches on. Stacy McCall's mum, Janice, can't get hold of her daughter on the phone. Stacy isn't picking up at Sherrill's, isn't picking up anywhere. Janice has friends who know people who work at Whitewater. She gets one of them to check. They check. Stacy and Suzie never showed up at Whitewater. Now Janice is scared, so she drives over to 1717 East Delmar herself. She opens the front door, same door Janelle opened that morning, still unlocked, hours later. And Cinnamon comes barreling at her again. Dog has now been in the house alone for what? The better part of a day. Janice walks through, same as Janelle did. Empty house, but she looks closer because she's a mother and her daughter isn't where she's supposed to be. She finds the 3 purses, all 3 of them, sitting on the floor of Susie's bedroom. Sherrill's purse, and this is the detail that lives with you. Sherrill's purse still had over $800 in cash in it, from a deposit she was meant to make from the salon. $800 in a purse sitting on the floor, untouched. Stacy's clothes from the night before, folded. Susie's contact lenses on the side, the Coke can, the makeup wipes, Sherrill's cigarettes. And Sherrill, by every account, was a chain smoker, the kind of smoker who would not leave the house without her cigarettes. Her cigarettes were still on the side. Susie's too. Janice picked up the phone in the kitchen and rang the police. And then, while she was waiting for them, she pressed play on the answering machine. There was a message on it, a strange one. She listened to it. And then the answering machine, the way old answering machines used to, played the message and erased it. Gone. The recording was on one cycle, played once, deleted once. And whatever was on that tape, whatever clue, whatever voice, whatever scrap of evidence, was gone before any investigator ever heard it. By the time the Springfield police arrived at 1717 East Delmar, between 10 and 20 people had been through that house. Friends, family, neighbours, Janelle, Mike, Janice. People had touched the door handles, walked through the rooms, opened the fridge, picked up the dog. The porch had been swept clean. The answering machine message had been erased. The single most important crime scene in Springfield, Missouri in 1992 had, by the time anyone in a uniform stepped into it, already been wiped. I want to sit in this for a minute because I think it's the thing about the Springfield 3 that doesn't get talked about enough. People focus on the suspects. People focus on the theories. People focus on the parking garage and the prison interviews and the alibis. And those bits are important, we'll get to them. But they're not the centre of this case. The centre of this case is what wasn't there. Think about what a crime scene normally gives you, in any case, anywhere. When something violent happens in a house, there are signs. A broken window, a toppled chair, blood spatter, hair, fibres, defensive wounds on the people who live there if they get away. Evidence of a struggle on the people who didn't. Footprints, a weapon, a neighbour who heard a shout. Something. At 1717 East Delmar there was, let me list it, a smashed porch globe, an intact bulb, a slightly bent window blind in Sherrill's bedroom, some used makeup wipes, a pack of cigarettes, a can of Coke, 3 handbags, $800 in cash, a dog, a television showing static, and 3 women who were no longer in the building. That's it. That is what the investigators had to work with. There is no forensic evidence in this case, not because none was left necessarily, but because by the time forensic people were in the house, they were working in an environment that had been comprehensively contaminated. 20 people through it. Glass swept off the porch, door handles touched, coat can possibly moved, answering machine wiped, sheets disturbed. The dog moved around between people. And the heartbreaking thing about that contamination after darkers is that nobody did it maliciously. Nobody who walked through that house meant to make things worse. Janelle didn't sweep the porch because she was destroying evidence. She swept it because her boyfriend didn't want her to cut her feet. Mike didn't pick up the broom thinking, I am about to delete the only forensic detail in the most important missing persons case Springfield will ever see. He thought, my girlfriend is barefoot, let me help. Janice didn't press play on the answering machine to wipe a clue. She pressed play because that's what you do when you're a worried mum, and the answering machine has a message on it. Every single act of contamination at that scene was a small act of kindness or concern, and cumulatively, they may have destroyed any chance the case ever had. There's something almost unbearable in that. The case wasn't undone by a killer being clever. It wasn't undone by a cover-up. It was undone by ordinary people, doing ordinary, decent human things. In the gap between when the women disappeared and when anyone realised they were really gone. 12 hours, maybe 15. That's all it took. And it's not the family's fault. To be very clear after Darkers, I'm not laying this at anybody's door. Janelle Kirby went on to live with this for the rest of her life. She's spoken about it. She knows. She was 18 and confused, and the porch had broken glass on it, and she wasn't wearing shoes. That's not on her. It's on the era. It's on the fact that in 1992, the average person did not have in their head a program that said, if your friend is missing from a house, do not touch the house. That program didn't exist in popular culture yet. Forensics on television was Quincy. It wasn't CSI. Nobody walked into a friend's empty house in 1992 thinking crime scene preservation. You walked in, you looked around, you swept up the glass. The answering machine, though, that one I want to come back to. Because of all the things lost that morning, the answering machine message is, I think, the thing that haunts this case the most. Janice McCall heard it. She is the only person, as far as the public record knows, who ever heard that message in full. She has described it as strange, disturbing. Police, when they got there, were extremely interested in it. They believed it may have contained a clue. Possibly a critical one. They did not believe it was connected to the prank calls Janelle had taken earlier that morning. It was something else. But it was gone, and what Janice remembers of it, and how reliable that memory is after 30 plus years of trying to remember the worst sound she ever heard once. That's not something I'm going to put a definitive line on in this episode, because I don't think anybody can. We will never know what was on that tape after Darkers. We will never know if it was the killer's voice. We will never know if it was Sherrill calling from somewhere, trying to leave a clue. We will never know if it was a wrong number that just happened to land at the worst possible time. It is one of the great unrecoverable pieces of evidence in American true crime, and it was destroyed by a button press, by a worried mother trying to find her daughter, in her dead quiet kitchen at 5:30 on a Sunday afternoon, with a dog sitting at her feet in a town called Springfield, Missouri. Right, so that's what the police had to work with. Almost nothing. And in spite of that, almost because of that, the case has attracted, by Springfield Police Department's own count, upwards of 5,000 tips over the years. Some serious, some psychic, some from prison inmates with axes to grind. Let me walk you through the main ones. The first name you have to know is Robert Craig Cox. Cox is a convicted kidnapper and armed robber currently serving time in Texas. He's also separately a suspect in a Florida murder. In 1992, when the Springfield Three vanished, Cox was living in Springfield. When investigators first interviewed him, he told them he was at his parents' house the night the women disappeared, and his then-girlfriend confirmed he was with her at church the following morning. Years later, his girlfriend recanted that alibi. She told investigators that Cox had asked her to say they were together. He had not, in fact, been with her. Then, in 1996 and 1997, from prison, Cox started talking to journalists. He told a Springfield News Leader reporter that he knew the three women had been murdered. He said he knew their bodies would never be recovered. He said he would tell the full story when his mother died. His mother, as far as the public record goes, is no longer living. Cox has not told the story. Now, Springfield police are clear about Cox. They have publicly said they do not believe Cox has any credibility in this case. He is, in their assessment, somebody who likes the attention. He has issued statements they consider self-serving false claims. He was in the area. He had a shaky alibi. He has made suggestive comments. He has not, as of any public record I can find, produced a single verifiable piece of information that only the killer would know. That doesn't make him innocent. It doesn't make him guilty either. It makes him a man in a cell who has spent 30 years half confessing without ever quite saying anything that can be confirmed. The second name is Dustin Reckler. Reckler was an ex-boyfriend of Suzie Streeter's. A few months before the women disappeared, Reckler and two friends broke into a Springfield mausoleum and stole gold fillings, about $30 worth, from a corpse. Just sit with that for a second. $30 worth of gold fillings from a dead body. That's the kind of person we're talking about. Suzie had given a statement to investigators about the mausoleum break-in. There was a strong likelihood she was going to be a witness against Reckler in court. He and his two associates were known to be together and in the area of Sherrill's house on the night the women went missing. Did Reckler do it? I don't know. The police investigated him. He was never charged. But of all the people in Suzie Streeter's life with a possible motive, he is, on paper, the one with the cleanest reason. The third thing I want to mention isn't a suspect. It's the parking garage. In 2007, a crime reporter named Kathy Baird brought a mechanical engineer called Rick Norland to a parking garage on the south side of Cox Hospital in Springfield. They scanned a corner of it with ground-penetrating radar. The reason, there was a tip, and I want to be honest with you about where that tip came from after Darkers. The tip came from somebody who either claimed to be psychic or claimed to have had a dream or claimed to have had a vision about the case. The Greene County Prosecutor's Office has been pretty open about that. The radar scan did find 3 anomalies, roughly the same size as each other, 2 parallel, 1 perpendicular. Consistent, the engineer said, with what you would expect to see at a grave site. The Springfield Police Department's response was, and I'll be straight with you, pretty unsentimental. Their spokesperson, Lisa Cox, no relation to Robert Craig Cox, pointed out 2 things. 1, the person who provided the tip had given no evidence, no logical reasoning, no actual case knowledge. 2, the parking garage was not built until September 1993, over a year after the women disappeared. So whoever buried whatever's down there, if anyone's down there at all, would have had to dispose of the bodies somewhere else for 15 plus months, then dig them back up, then rebury them under a hospital parking garage that was being actively constructed, which is, to put it gently, not the most efficient murder. The radar anomalies are real, the geometry is suggestive, but the Springfield Police Department, who actually have the case file, do not consider this a credible lead, and they have publicly said they have no intention of digging up the parking garage. And then there's the call. December 31st, 1992, a man rings the America's Most Wanted hotline and tells the operator he has information about the disappearance of the Springfield 3. The operator, doing exactly what she was meant to do, tries to connect him through to the Springfield investigators on the case. The line drops, the call disconnects. He is never heard from again. The police later said the caller had, quote, prime knowledge of the abductions. They publicly begged him to call back. He never did. Sherrill Levitt would be 79 years old this year, if she were alive. Suzie Streeter would be 51. Stacy McCall would be 50. In 1997, 5 years after they disappeared, Sherrill and Suzie were declared legally dead. Stacy McCall's family has, I believe, never sought the same declaration. The case files, all 3 of them, are still officially filed as missing. In the NamUs database, in the FBI's VICAP records, in the Springfield Police Department's cold case unit. They are not closed. They have never been closed. The case has been featured on 48 Hours, on America's Most Wanted, on Investigation Discovery's Disappeared, on People Magazine Investigates. There have been podcasts. There has been a small town disappearance series from a journalist called Anne Roderick Jones. There is, in Phelps Grove Park in Springfield, a bench. A simple wooden bench dedicated in 1997 to the 3 of them. People still leave flowers there. Stacy McCall's father, Stu, died in October of 2025, 82 years old, without ever knowing what happened to his daughter. I want to come back to where we started after Darkers, because I've thought about this case for a long time, and the thing I keep coming back to is that porch light. Whoever broke that porch globe, on the night of the 6th or the morning of the 7th of June 1992, they will have known what they were doing. They will have known they were taking the light out. They will have known in some way what was about to happen next. And whoever they were, they left almost nothing behind. No print I'm aware of anyway. No fibre that ever led anywhere. No witness who saw a car at the curb. 3 women, a mother, a daughter's best friend, taken from inside a small 1-storey house on a quiet street, in a town where, by every account, that sort of thing didn't happen. Taken so cleanly that, 33 years later, the most concrete piece of evidence we still have is the answering machine message that nobody can quite remember. This is a case that lives in absences. The absence of the women, the absence of the message, the absence of the answer, the absence of an arrest. There's a kind of grief that hardens into routine. Stu McCall went to that bench in Phelps Grove for 30 years, did the same thing every June, and the case did not move. Maybe one day it does. There's still DNA technology being applied. There are still people in the Springfield Police Department who are paid to think about this case. There are still tips that come in. There is still, somewhere, somebody who knows. The dog, Cinnamon, lived out her years with a family member of Suzie's. She, of course, never told anybody anything. She was the only living thing in that house when whatever happened, happened. And like the women themselves, she was taken at her word, and her word was silence. 3 women, 1 house, 0 trace. 33 years. If you live in Springfield, Missouri, or anywhere in the Ozarks, or if you've ever heard a story about that night from anybody, however small, the Springfield Police Department's tip line is still open. There's a link in the show notes. Somebody, somewhere, knows what happened on East Delmar Street. Until then, make of that what you will, After Darkers. That's it from me this evening. Thank you, genuinely, for spending part of your night with me. It means the world that you keep tuning in. Now, a quick one before we go. We are independent over here, just 3 friends and the static, and we are trying to get this show to 500 subscribers on YouTube. If you've got a spare 3 seconds and you're enjoying what we're doing on this little frequency, head over there and hit subscribe. It genuinely, properly helps. And if you want a bit more from us between episodes, merch, the blog, every episode in one place, all of it, that lives at staticafterdark.com. Link is in the show notes. You know the drill. Until then, look after yourselves, lock your doors, and stay tuned. I'm Lucy. You've been listening to Static After Dark.